Central Asia is the core region of the Asian continent and stretches from the Caspian Sea in the west to China in the east and from Afghanistan in the south to Russia in the north. It is also sometimes referred to as Middle Asia and, colloquially, the stance, and is within the scope of the wider Eurasian continent. In modern contexts, all definitions of Central Asia include these five republics of the former Soviet Union: Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, and Uzbekistan, for a total population of about 66 million as of 2013-2014. Afghanistan is also sometimes included. Various definitions of Central Asia's exact composition exist, and not one definition is universally accepted. Despite this uncertainty in defining borders, the region does have some important overall characteristics. For one, Central Asia has historically been closely tied to its nomadic peoples and the Silk Road. As a result, it has acted as a crossroads for the movement of people, goods, and ideas between Europe, Western Asia, South Asia, and East Asia. During pre-Islamic and early Islamic times, Central Asia was a predominantly Iranian region that included the sedentary Eastern Iranian-speaking Bactrians, Sogdians and Khorasmians, and the semi-nomadic Scythians and Parthians. The ancient sedentary population played an important role in the history of Central Asia. After expansion by Turkic peoples, Central Asia also became the homeland for many Turkic peoples, including the Kazakhs, Uzbeks, Turkmen, Kyrgyz, Uyghurs and other extinct Turkic nations. Central Asia is sometimes referred to as Turkestan. Since the earliest of times, Central Asia has been a crossroads between different civilizations. The Silk Road connected Muslim lands with the people of Europe, India, and China. This crossroads position has intensified the conflict between tribalism and traditionalism and modernization. For the mid-19th century, up to the end of the 20th century, most of Central Asia was part of the Russian Empire and later the Soviet Union, both being Slavic majority countries. As of 2011, the five stans are still home to about 7 million Russians and 500,000 Ukrainians. Definitions. The idea of Central Asia as a distinct region of the world was introduced in 1843 by the geographer Alexander von Humboldt. The borders of Central Asia are subject to multiple definitions. Historically built political geography and geoculture are two significant parameters widely used in the scholarly literature about the definitions of the Central Asia. The most limited definition was the official one of the Soviet Union, which defined Middle Asia as consisting solely of Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan. This definition was also often used outside the USSR during this period. However, the Russian culture has two distinct terms, and soon after independence, the leaders of the four former Soviet Central Asian republics met in Tashkent and declared that the definition of Central Asia should include Kazakhstan as well as the original four included by the Soviets. Since then, this has become the most common definition of Central Asia. The UNESCO General History of Central Asia, written just before the collapse of the USSR, defines the region based on climate and uses far larger borders. According to it, Central Asia includes Mongolia, Tibet, northeast Iran, central East Russia south of the Tiger, large parts of China, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and the former Central Asian Soviet republics. An alternative method is to define the region based on ethnicity, and in particular areas populated by Eastern Turkic, Eastern Iranian, or Mongolian peoples. These areas include Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region, the Turkic regions of southern Siberia, the Five Republics, and Afghan Turkestan. Afghanistan as a whole, the northern and western areas of Pakistan and the Kashmir Valley of India may also be included. The Tibetans and Ladakhi are also included. Insofar, most of the mentioned peoples are considered the indigenous peoples of the vast region. There are several places that claim to be the geographic center of Asia, for example Kyzyl, the capital of Tuva in the Russian Federation, and a village 200 miles north of Urumqi, the capital of the Xinjiang region of China. Geography. Central Asia is an extremely large region of varied geography, including high passes and mountains, vast deserts, and especially treeless, grassy steppes. The vast steppe areas of Central Asia are considered together with the steppes of Eastern Europe as a homogeneous geographical zone known as the Eurasian steppe. Much of the land of Central Asia is too dry, too rugged for farming. The Gobi Desert extends from the foot of the Pamirs, 77 degrees east, to the Great Khingan Mountains, 116 degrees to 118 degrees east. Central Asia has the following geographic extremes: the world's northernmost desert at Burugdalayan Els, Mongolia, 50 degrees 18 N. The Northern Hemisphere's southernmost permafrost at Erdenet-Sotsum, Mongolia, 46 degrees 17 N. The world's shortest distance between non-frozen desert and permafrost, 770 kilometers. The Eurasian pole of inaccessibility. A majority of the people earn a living by herding livestock. Industrial activity centers in the region cities. Major rivers of the region include the Amu Darya, the Sir Darya, Irtish, the Hari River and the Murghab River. Major bodies of water include the Aral Sea and Lake Balkhash, both of which are part of the huge West Central Asian Endorheic Basin that also includes the Caspian Sea. Both of these bodies of water have shrunk significantly in recent decades due to diversion of water from rivers that feed them for irrigation and industrial purposes. Water is an extremely valuable resource in arid Central Asia and can lead to rather significant international disputes. Divisions. The northern belt is part of the Eurasian steppe. In the northwest, north of the Caspian Sea, Central Asia merges into the Russian steppe. To the northeast, the Dzungaria and the Tarim Basin may sometimes be included in Central Asia. Just west of Dzungaria, Jadisu, or Semirichi, is south of Lake Balkhash and north of the Tian Shan Mountains. Khorezm is south of the Aral Sea along the Amu Darya. Southeast of the Aral Sea, Mavrana is between the Amu Darya and Sir Darya. Transoxiana is the land north of the middle and upper Amu Darya. Bactria included northern Afghanistan and the upper Amu Darya. Sogdiana was north of Bactria and included the trading cities of Bukhara and Samarkand. Khorasan and Marjana approximate northeastern Iran. The Kizilkum Desert is northeast of the Amu Darya, and the Karakum Desert southwest of it. Climate. Because Central Asia is not buffered by a large body of water, temperature fluctuations are more severe. In most of the places the climate is moderate. According to the WWF Ecozones system, Central Asia is part of the Palearctic ecozone. The largest biomes in Central Asia are the temperate grasslands, savannas, and shrublands biome. Central Asia also contains the montane grasslands and shrublands, deserts and xeric shrublands, as well as temperate coniferous forest biomes. History. Although, during the Golden Age of Orientalism, the place place of Central Asia in the world history was marginalized. Contemporary historiography has rediscovered the centrality of the Central Asia. The history of Central Asia is defined by the area's climate and geography. The aridness of the region made agriculture difficult, and its distance from the sea cut it off from much trade. Thus, few major cities developed in the region. Instead, the area was for millennia dominated by the nomadic horse peoples of the steppe. Relations between the steppe nomads and the settled people in and around Central Asia were long marked by conflict. The nomadic lifestyle was well suited to warfare, and the steppe horse riders became some of the most militarily potent people in the world, limited only by the lack of internal unity. Any internal unity that was achieved was most probably due to the influence of the Silk Road, which traveled along Central Asia. Periodically, great leaders of changing conditions would organize several tribes into one force and create an almost unstoppable power. These included the Hun invasion of Europe, the Wuhu attacks on China, and most notably the Mongol conquest of much of Eurasia. During pre-Islamic and early Islamic times, southern Central Asia was inhabited predominantly by speakers of Iranian languages. Among the ancient sedentary Iranian peoples, the Sogdians and Khorasmians played an important role, while Iranian peoples such as Scythians and the later on Alans lived a nomadic or semi-nomadic lifestyle. The well-preserved Tarim mummies with Caucasoid features have been found in the Tarim Basin. The main migration of Turkic peoples occurred between the 5th and 10th centuries, when they spread across most of Central Asia. The Tang Chinese were defeated by the Arabs at the Battle of Talis in 751, marking the end of the Tang dynasty's western expansion. The Tibetan Empire would take the chance to rule portion of Central Asia along with South Asia. During the 13th and 14th centuries, the Mongols conquered and ruled the largest contiguous empire in recorded history. Most of Central Asia fell under the control of the Chagatai Khanate. The dominance of the nomads ended in the 16th century, as firearms allowed settled peoples to gain control of the region. Russia, China, and other powers expanded into the region and had captured the bulk of Central Asia by the end of the 19th century. After the Russian Revolution, the Western Central Asian regions were incorporated into the Soviet Union. The eastern part of Central Asia, known as East Turkestan or Xinjiang, was incorporated into the People's Republic of China. Mongolia remained independent but became a Soviet satellite state. Afghanistan remained relatively independent of major influence by the USSR until the Saur Revolution of 1978. The Soviet areas of Central Asia saw much industrialization and construction of infrastructure, but also the suppression of local cultures. Hundreds of thousands of deaths from failed collectivization programs, and a lasting legacy of ethnic tensions and environmental problems. Soviet authorities deported millions of people, including entire nationalities, from western areas of the USSR to Central Asia and Siberia. According to Turaj Atabaki and Sanjot Mendel, from 1959 to 1970, about 2 million people from various parts of the Soviet Union migrated to Central Asia, of which about 1 million moved to Kazakhstan. With the collapse of the Soviet Union, 5 countries gained independence. In nearly all the new states, former Communist Party officials retained power as local strongmen. None of the new republics could be considered functional democracies in the early days of independence, although in recent years Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan and Mongolia have made further progress towards more open societies, unlike Uzbekistan, Tajikistan and Turkmenistan, which have maintained many Soviet-style repressive tactics. Culture. Religions. Islam is the religion most common in the Central Asian republics, Afghanistan, Xinjiang and the peripheral western regions, such as Bashkortostan. Most Central Asian Muslims are Sunni, although there are sizable Shia minorities in Afghanistan and Tajikistan. Buddhism and Zoroastrianism were the major faiths in Central Asia prior to the arrival of Islam. Zoroastrian influence is still felt today in such celebrations as Nowruz, held in all 5 of the Central Asian states. Buddhism was a prominent religion in Central Asia prior to the arrival of Islam, and the transmission of Buddhism along the Silk Road eventually brought the religion to China. Amongst the Turkic peoples, Tengrianism was the popular religion before arrival of Islam. Tibetan Buddhism is most common in Tibet, Mongolia, Ladakh and the southern Russian regions of Siberia. The form of Christianity most practiced in the region in previous centuries was Nestorianism, but now the largest denomination is the Russian Orthodox Church, with many members in Kazakhstan. The Bukharan Jews were once a sizable community in Uzbekistan and Tajikistan, but nearly all have emigrated since the dissolution of the Soviet Union. In Siberia, shamanism is practiced, including forms of divination, such as kumalak. Contact and migration with Han people from China has brought Confucianism, Daoism, Mahayana Buddhism, and other Chinese folk beliefs into the region. Arts at the crossroads of Asia. Shamanistic practices live alongside Buddhism. Thus, Shama, Lord of Death, was revered in Tibet as a spiritual guardian and judge. Mongolian Buddhism, in particular, was influenced by Tibetan Buddhism. The Qianlong Emperor of Qing China in the 18th century was Tibetan Buddhist and would sometimes travel from Beijing to other cities for personal religious worship. Central Asia also has an indigenous form of improvisational oral poetry that is over 1,000 years old. It is principally practiced in Kyrgyzstan and Kazakhstan by Akhans, lyrical improvisationists. They engage in lyrical battles, the Itisha, the Alam Sabak. The tradition arose out of early bardic oral historians. They are usually accompanied by a stringed instrument, in Kyrgyzstan a 3-stringed kamaz, and in Kazakhstan a similar 2-stringed instrument, the dombra. Photography in Central Asia began to develop after 1882, when a Russian Mennonite photographer named Wilhelm Penner moved to the Khanate of Khiva during the Mennonite migration to Central Asia led by Class EPP, Jr. Upon his arrival to Khanate of Khiva, Penner shared his photography skills with a local student Kudai Bergan Divanov, who later became the founder of Uzbek photography. Some also learned to sing the Manas, Kyrgyzstan's epic poem. During Soviet rule, Akhan performance was co-opted by the authorities and subsequently declined in popularity. With the fall of the Soviet Union, it has enjoyed a resurgence, although Akhans still do use their art to campaign for political candidates. A 2005 The Washington Post article proposed a similarity between the improvisational art of Akhans and modern freestyle rap performed in the West. As a consequence of Russian colonization, European fine arts, painting, sculpture and graphics, have developed in Central Asia. The first years of the Soviet regime saw the appearance of modernism, which took inspiration from the Russian avant-garde movement. Until the 1980s, Central Asian arts had developed along with general tendencies of Soviet arts. In the 90s, arts of the region underwent some significant changes. Institutionally speaking, some fields of arts were regulated by the birth of the art market. Some stayed as representatives of official views, while many were sponsored by international organizations. The years of 1990 to 2000 were times for the establishment of contemporary arts in the region. Many important international exhibitions are taking place. Central Asian art is represented in European and American museums, and the Central Asian Pavilion at the Venice Biennale has been organized since 2005. Sports. Equestrian sports are traditional in Central Asia, with disciplines like endurance riding, buzkashi, jigat and kyzku. Association football is popular across Central Asia. Most countries are members of the Central Asian Football Association, a region of the Asian Football Confederation. However, Kazakhstan is a member of the UEFA. Wrestling is popular across Central Asia, with Kazakhstan having claimed 14 Olympic medals and Uzbekistan 7. As former Soviet states, Central Asian countries have been successful in gymnastics. Cricket is the most popular sport in Afghanistan. The Afghanistan national cricket team, first formed in 2001, has claimed wins over Bangladesh, West Indies and Zimbabwe. Notable Kazakh competitors include cyclists Alexander Vinokourov and Andrei Kashechkin, boxer Vasily Gurov, runner Olga Shishagina, decathlete Dmitry Karpov, gymnast Alia Yusupova, judoka Askar Zhikiev and Maxim Rakov, skier Vladimir Smirnov, weightlifter Ilya Ilyin, and figure skater Denis Den. Notable Uzbekistani competitors include cyclist Jamaluddin Abdo-Japarov, boxer Ruslan Chagayev, canoe Michael Kolganov, gymnast Oksana Chasovitina, tennis player Denis Istomin and chess player Rustam Kasimdzhanov. Territory and region data. Demographics. By a broad definition including Mongolia and Afghanistan, more than 90 million people live in Central Asia, about 2% of Asia's total population. Of the regions of Asia, only North Asia has fewer people. It has a population density of 9 people per square kilometer, vastly less than the 80.5 people per square kilometer of the continent as a whole. Languages. Russian, as well as being spoken by around 6 million ethnic Russians and Ukrainians of Central Asia, is the de facto lingua franca throughout the former Soviet Central Asian republics. Mandarin Chinese has an equally dominant presence in Inner Mongolia, Qinghai and Xinjiang. The languages of the majority of the inhabitants of the former Soviet Central Asian republics come from the Turkic language group. Turkmen is mainly spoken in Turkmenistan, and is a minority language in Afghanistan, Russia, Iran and Turkey. Kazakh and Kyrgyz are related languages of the Kyrgyzstan group of Turkic languages and are spoken throughout Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, and as a minority language in Tajikistan, Afghanistan and Xinjiang. Uzbek and Uyghur are spoken in Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan and Xinjiang. The Turkic languages may belong to a larger, but controversial, Altaic language family, which includes Mongolian. Mongolian is spoken throughout Mongolia and into Buryatia, Karmik, Tuva, Inner Mongolia and Xinjiang. Middle Iranian languages were once spoken throughout Central Asia, such as the once prominent Sogdian, Khwarezmian, Bactrian and Scythian, which are now extinct and belong to the Eastern Iranian family. The Eastern Iranian Pashto language is still spoken in Afghanistan and northwestern Pakistan. Other minor Eastern Iranian languages such as Shufni, Munji, Kashkashimi, Sarikoli, Jawaki, Yagnubi and Ossetic are also spoken at various places in Central Asia. Varieties of Persian are also spoken as a major language in the region, locally known as Dari, Tajik, and Bukhari. Tocharian, another Indo-European language group which was once predominant in oases on the northern edge of the Tarim Basin of Xinjiang, is now extinct. Other language groups include the Tibetic languages, spoken by around around 6 million people across the Tibetan Plateau and into Qinghai, Sichuan, Ladakh and Baltistan, and the Nuristani languages of northeastern Afghanistan. Dardic languages, such as Shina, Kashmiri, Pashtun and Koa, are also spoken in eastern Afghanistan. The Gilgit-Baltistan and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa of Pakistan and the Kashmir state of India.